Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the show. I appreciate you joining me today. Let's spend this video reviewing 11 of the most common interview questions that you are going to encounter. The 11 questions we're going to talk about are: what are your greatest strengths and weaknesses? Tell me about yourself. Why do you want this job? How do you handle stress? What's your ideal work environment? How do you stay updated in your field? How do you handle disagreements with coworkers? Describe a challenge you faced at work. Where do you see yourself in 5 years? What's your leadership style? And what questions do you have for us? So before we dive into each of these individually, I want to say if you like my content, I appreciate you checking me out. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe and the notification bell so you get all of my videos that are released daily and my 2 long form videos that are released every single week. All right, now that's out of the way, let's get into this. What are your greatest strengths and weaknesses? So from the strengths perspective, you want to frame this as it relates to the job description. So in the job description, you should be able to pick out 1 to 3 things that this company is looking for. It's usually going to be the higher in the list it is, then the more priority it is for them and their organization. And if you just think about this for yourself, when you're making a list of things, it's usually the things that come to mind first that are of the most importance. That's why they're top of mind. Same concept here. Now, if you want to kind of go above and beyond, a little bit of an actual hack that I would say as a pro tip is in the 1 to 3 strengths that you kind of want to display, pick one of them that relates to something in research that you found, not in the job description. And this might come in the form of a social media post where they had a partnership that they announced, or a conference that they're attending, or a recent product release, or a new initiative. It could be on the website as well, but usually social media has the more up-to-date stuff. So that's what I would ideally say here. And it's honestly a very simple framework. And I'll give you an example. We're going to do something like my ability to blank, insert your strength. In my last role, I use this to blank. And the latter part is the story side of the equation. So situation, task, action, result. If you are familiar with the STAR, additional little tip here is add in a second R to where if maybe it was a story that involved review, so maybe you implemented something new, it was a new policy or a new training or something like that, and then 6 months later you reviewed it for success after the fact, that would be a great kind of addition to throw in there as well. So, hey, this was the initial result. This was the immediate impact. And then a year later, this was actually the continued impact. So showing that you continuously review, you don't just set and forget. Most people forget that second R in STAR. So something very, very simple here might be along the lines of, one of my greatest strengths is my ability to get the best out of the people that work for me in my leadership roles. And I do this by really personalizing our one-on-ones and being able to deliver on providing growth maps, concrete objectives, and very clear impact for their results. And I make sure I consistently deliver. And so I work with, the people to map out 6 to 12 month strategic roadmaps for their growth and skill development and what they can expect at the end and what this is intending to work towards, and building a really robust incentivization and transparency structure. And this has resulted in me facilitating 9 promotions over the last few roles that I've had, all of which people have then gone on to a variety of roles, whether it was just moving up to the next tier, moving into seniors, or even helping people reach their leadership goals. And this has created an immense sense of loyalty, employee retention, and overall satisfaction when engagement surveys were issued amongst the entire company. My department specifically was consistently one of the highest in engagement and satisfaction. So this can be something that, right, very, very simple, very concrete, straight to the point, and kind of gave you the example there. I very quickly got out of the way what the strength was, and the bulk was on the story. Please know that this was a on-the-fly example, so I would definitely have a much more rehearsed or tailored example if I was going for a specific interview. But again, that's just my off-the-cuff strength that I had. Now, the weakness, the key thing here is you're not necessarily going to be able to showcase a weakness that ties to the job description or specific to that company. So what this needs to be is personalized to you and genuine. You cannot sit there and do a weakness as a strength. Oh, my weakness is that I just work too much, and that causes me to do a blah, blah, blah. No. Okay, it needs to be a genuine weakness, something that you are actively working on improving for yourself. And if you are not actively working on improving yourself, you're probably not going to be the person the company wants to hire in general, because very few companies want to hire people that are just box checkers. So this needs to be something actually tangible, tactical, and then what you are doing to overcome this challenge. So for me, for instance, one of my biggest things I focus on the last couple years of my life has honestly been alternate communication methods outside of being direct. And so what I would say something here is my greatest weakness has been expanding my communication tool belt. I, by default, am a very direct and concise communicator, but I've learned that this doesn't work for all personality types. So I've had to work with some of the people that work with me, for me, or that even are above me in order to have them give me, through instruction, real-time feedback of when I communicated something incorrectly. And I let them know that I was looking for this. So on my own, I was also taking some online courses in Udemy. I also was working with people in my network to facilitate this and my own personal mentors. But I also asked for everyone that I interacted with to give me real-time feedback when I said something that was potentially incorrect, and gave them permission to do it, so they knew if they approached me that it wasn't going to be an issue and that I was actively working on this particular skill set. And now I have gotten consistent feedback over the last 2 years when it comes to my reviews and my colleagues and peer reviews that I am one of the better communicators, and that people really enjoy working with me, and that through collaboration, we just continuously get stuff done. So that could be something that was like, was a greatest weakness that I solved. And you can also just say it's something that you're actively working on as well. So if I were to maybe say that same thing a year ago, then I would say, here's the message or the steps that I've taken. I'm still actively working on resolving this issue, as I don't feel it is, adequate to my standards of being fulfilled. And the irony of also something like this is it is a genuine weakness, but at the same time, if you convey it, being that it's communication, in a very professional and positive way, then the person on the other end is actually going to make their own opinion of saying, man, he actually framed this in a very good way. This was a very good communicative experience, and yet he still thinks he's not adequate. This is someone that holds himself to a high standard. So that's kind of another little behind the scenes hack there, is if it's something you're actively working on, but you're actually pretty good at still, that could be a way to do that. But it does need to be something genuine. That is the key. And that has been stated on my reviews for the last couple years, or a couple years ago, multiple years in a row, of this was a key skill I needed to develop. Okay, moving on to the next question. Tell me about yourself. So this is one I have multiple videos on, entire things dedicated to. So check out the previous content on this. But here's the key framing of tell me about yourself. You do not answer with a declaration immediately. You simply ask, do you want to know personal or professional? Take control from the beginning of the interview with this question by asking one in return. Let them know that you are not just here to answer questions. This is going to be conversational, and put your flag in the dirt and say, hey, this is a two-way street. I'm going to be interviewing you just as much as you're interviewing me. So they say, tell me about yourself. Would you like to know personal or professional? They will almost always say both. And this is where you kind of have a 1.5 to 2 minute, or I'd say 1 to 2 minute rehearsed answer about both of those equations. You want the majority to be focused on professional. And what I would do here is you don't sit there and review your whole resume. Keep it pretty concise. Again, similar to the greatest strengths. Have a couple points from the resume or from the job description and job posting that you can speak to, and immediately go to those. Right. So you could just say, I am passionate about leveraging my position as a director within IT to facilitate ABCD, right? Whatever it might be. Like I said, 1 to 3, 2 to 4, somewhere in that range of things. And here's some examples of what I've done there. And here's where I'm looking to go. Already get ahead. I know in the future we have the question we're going to talk about of where do you see yourself in 5 years, but get ahead of that a little bit, right? So tell me about yourself. I'm someone who is forward thinking. You're putting that out there already by saying, here's where I've been and here's why I'm going to kick ass at your job. But at the same time, here's also where I'm looking to go. On the personal side, keep it very surface level, but make it something that might be relatable. I'm a big outdoors person. So I usually say something along the lines on the personal side. I'm a big outdoors person, while my entire career and professional acumen is around the technology landscape. When I do get the opportunity to fully disconnect, I absolutely do. So I'm a big hiker, backpacker, hunter, camper, etc. You get me outside, I'm a happy camper, unless it's on water. I only like water if it's frozen, aka snow. But at the end of the day, get me outside and I'm going to be happy. So that, and then the latter part there where, I kind of made a little joke about I only like frozen water, usually opens up some conversation almost consistently every single time. There's people who are like, oh my gosh, like you don't like, kayaking or going on the river or this or that, blah, 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 right? And then you kind of have a nice little personal back and forth and banter. So something like that where you showcase your personal, be genuine again about your hobbies. If you have a little kind of quip or joke or something that's unique about your take on it, throw that in there too, so that you have something that's relatable. Okay, why do you want this job? Third question. So this is going to be, again, based on the research that you've done from the company, but again, you want to relate it to them. And this one should not be super hard. Is going to tie back into your tell me about yourself of where you're looking to go. And you could say, why do you want this job? Right. So as previously stated, I mentioned this is where I'm looking to go. And your company's focus on ABC initiative, right? I really think aligns with my current skill set, with me being able to hit the ground running and where I'm looking to go, to where together we can achieve where I'm looking to go and where the company's looking to go together and build something great, right? From what I've gathered, your company has XYZ stated company missions and values. And again, I align with that through here's my experience or how I have fulfilled that as well. Again, not groundbreaking, keep it short, sweet, simple. Why do you want this job? The key, if you're noticing, the theme to all of this, excluding the tell me about yourself, is you want to tailor it to them. That is the common thread between all these questions thus far and even some of the ones upcoming. So why do you want this job? Plain and simple, right? Relate it back to the tell me about yourself of your future. You want to relate it to your company, research about something that they have going on, something that you've discovered about them, and that you think that mutually together you guys can achieve both sides of these dreams here. And that's why you're excited to come and fulfill the overall company mission of blank, right? That's what you're looking to do here. Don't think I need to say any more there. We'll just go on to the next question here. So how do you handle stress? This is similar to the weakness one. Again, all of us have had to learn stress management techniques. You're not born coming out of the womb knowing how to manage stress. You're not the greatest at managing stress when you're 18 years old and going into the workforce generally for your first time as like a big boy job, unless you're going to college. You don't learn the greatest stress techniques in college, so on and so forth, right? So this is all going to be learned behavior. And that's what you want to say here, right? What are the techniques that you have? And so how do you handle stress? For me, my general techniques are that I use Pomodoro methods throughout the day. I have a very strict prioritization system where I use an Eisenhower matrix. I have a clear to-do list every single day. I time block myself. And then in my personal life, I also make sure I meditate, I read, and I work out, right? These are the combinations of my handling stress. And so that's what I'm going to say. I'm going to be honest. I'm going to be genuine, right? And it's, again, showcasing that you have put time and effort into it. Now, I have a pretty robust system, both during the workday and outside the workday, that allow me to handle stress. If I didn't have a quite robust system yet, then I would say the tools that I do have. Hey, I have my Pomodoro cycle and I time block myself, but I still struggle sometimes with high critical events. For instance, if there's a company outage or if there's a site outage or something like that, that it takes me a few minutes to sometimes settle down after the initial, flood of adrenaline in the moment. And so I'm working on making that less, going down from, minutes for me to settle down into much more real time, to where this thing becomes more routine and more regular when I do experience these particular things. And what I'm doing is I'm exploring different techniques through some Udemy courses, some online training, peer network, whatever it might be. So again, showcasing that how you are growing and what you're looking to do here. What's your ideal work environment? This is one where a lot of people get tripped up because they think that this is a question where they try to formulate in their brain what the other side wants to hear. And this is just flat out the incorrect approach, because I get it. If you are desperate for a job, meaning like genuinely, like financially, you are struggling and without this position, you're just going to be SOL. I get why you want to answer this question correctly. But again, this is a genuine one because you want the other side to know what is going to make you successful. Or if you're on the leadership side of the equation, what type of environment you are going to create as a leader. And if there's going to be conflict there immediately from what the environment you're going to try to create or the environment that you ideally work in and what this company currently does, it's just not going to work. And it's a recipe for disaster because you're going to end up getting the job. You're going to feel like great, hunky dory, pressure's off. But then 3 months later, because it's not a great fit, it's just going to put you back into that same scenario again. And you're just going to wish that you didn't take it, or you're potentially going to get fired, or it's just not working out, whatever it might be. So this is one where just, again, be honest and be genuine about your ideal work environment. if it's working with the team, if it's being autonomous, if it's having freedom, if it's having the ability to fail, if it's having transparent communication all the way from the top, all the way to the bottom. If you're somebody who needs to be micromanaged because you know that your internal accountability sucks and you need some external accountability, like whatever it is, it does not matter about what you believe the other person's interpretation is going to be. Be honest with them. And the only way that you can do this is through a level of introspection. So you are going to have to ask yourself, like, when have I had the most success? And I don't care what environment this is. Think about any time where you've done anything well. And if you've never done anything well in your life, I question whether or not you're being just ridiculously and obnoxiously hard on yourself. Because by well, I'm not saying that you lived up to your own potentially impossible standard. But when you looked around at everybody else, like, you were above average in your result. Okay. And everybody has that moment in something. What facilitated that environment? For some people, it might be when they were an athlete. And ironically, that means that it was super structured, super dictated. Their leader gave them the parameters of success and they usually fulfilled it. That's how a lot of coaching works. There's also some athletes that very much they're coached on the skills and their creativity of play is what makes it successful there. There's also athletes who don't excel in team sports, but you excel in solo sports. I'm just using sports as a through line and an example where most people can at least understand, even if you were never in the sports thing. But actually look back on your life and go, when have I been successful? When have I gotten the best result that I could, even if it wasn't the best result possible? And what facilitated that? What was the coaching? What was the mentoring? What was the leadership? What did I do on a daily basis? That is how you answer this question, right? And so again, it's a being genuine, but the general framework to answer this question, I thrive in blank type of environment, right? Based off of what I have seen, your company culture facilitates this because of A, B, C, and D. Would you agree? Or, where do you want me to dive deeper? Or what type of culture do you prefer? Again, come back with a question on this one as well to confirm that your understanding of their culture and their environment is going to fit with you. But this is one where just be genuine, because otherwise you are setting everybody up for failure. Unless, like I said, you are just in dire straits. But even then, if you are struggling and you absolutely have to answer this question correct, by you trying to assume what the other side wants to hear, what are the chances that that is a correct answer versus just your genuine one? And I would say you are statistically more likely to fail by assuming what the other side wants to hear than by giving your genuine answer. Again, humans want to relate to humans, and that alone is huge for being successful in an interview. And so by you being genuine, you more than likely will find something relatable between you and the person interviewing you. How do you stay updated in your field? This is one that I struggled with for a long time, because I will tell you that when I disconnect. I am done. I have worked myself to the bone every day, day in and day out, since I graduated high school at 18. I consistently put in anywhere from 12 to 16-hour days. I'm going on, what do we got here? 15 years of doing so, right? So people that say burnout is a thing because of too many hours worked, completely disagree. Have I had my phases of burnout? Yes. Was it because of the amount of work? No. It's because of the type of work. But that's other content. If you want to go check that out on my philosophy of burnout, please do. But the reason I struggle with this question is because I am purely an on-job training person. I don't have any certifications. I don't have any formal education. I did not go to college, right? But I constantly am learning new things, because when I see something, I want to do something. And it's, ooh, what is that? Or going to a mentor and saying, hey, I noticed you're doing this thing. Can I take that off your plate? And then, I took this off your plate now. Can you show me how you approach ABC or whatever it is? Like, having reciprocal relationships, like, that's how I've always stayed updated in my field. Now, recently that has changed. I do subscribe to a couple different newsletters. I am constantly researching things from an industry perspective, because we are in such an age of evolution that started honestly about 5-6 years ago. You could even say a little bit more, honestly. But with the cloud revolution in the technology space and then now AI, like, I think if you're not keeping up with those things through some way, whether it's forums, videos, skill set, just trial and error, whatever it might be, that you're going to be left behind. So the way that I used to answer this one, when I didn't do that, right? I would say I stay up to date by continuously researching forums, by continuously researching solutions to problems proactively, and making sure that I am providing value and have a great network of mentors and coaches that are in cybersecurity, cloud computing, and these sorts of realms to help maintain facilitating relationships and communication about the different changes and approaches and engineering styles within the IT landscape. I was like, but when it comes to, am I sitting there and do I have a lab environment at home? I do not. Am I studying for certifications at home? No, I'm not. I'm a purely on job training person, and my experience showcases that being blank, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, of why I'm going to be awesome at this role. And that is how I stay up to date. By any time I see something, I research it and I do something. I don't let stuff sit idly by. I don't like to let problems linger. I don't like to let things fester. So I learn by just every time I see something, I do something. Plain and simple. And I make sure that everything else that I'm supposed to be doing that was already identified never falls by the wayside. Right? That's how I used to answer it. It's like, look, I'm not the guy that's out here researching forms and things like that, because instead of that, I'm going to be fixing your stuff. I'm going to be making your company better. I'm going to be giving you a better customer experience. That's how I'm going to stay up to date, is by never ending results for you. That was my answer to that. So that's a great way to kind of frame that answer if you're someone who was like me and just didn't do that, right? Okay. Next up. So how do you handle disagreements with coworkers? This is one where, again, you want to be genuine, you want to be honest, and hopefully you've had a disagreement with someone. And even if you haven't had it with coworkers, it's the same thing, right? Whether it was friends, whether it was teachers or professors or colleagues or your parents or whatever, right? And hopefully you have relatively sophisticated skills in this realm. But if you don't, that's also okay, right? And so what you want to say is something along the lines of, look, I generally focus on, so I'll tell you my strategy. So how do you handle disagreements with coworkers? I'm one that I start with asking questions. I seek to understand before I even consider something a disagreement. And what I mean by that is disagreement to me implies a level of conflict. So I'm going to go to the person that I tentatively disagree with and ask a lot of questions. Try to understand their point of view, where it's coming from, why they handled the situation in a particular way. And I'm just going to ask questions until it's kind of exhausted, and then say, okay, I actually like, then potentially the disagreement's off, because maybe the information remove the entire disagreement because you understand that they saw something that you didn't, or maybe their way actually is going to be better than your way because of something you discovered in the process, right? So you're actually potentially removing the full disagreement by going in with a level of, honestly, like inquisition or curiosity. That's the way I kind of look at it. If you don't, then you could say, right, I take those questions and that I've, leveraged my active listening skills and I then try to find common ground. I will then say, okay, well, I appreciate you understanding this point of view or factoring in this piece of the equation or taking this approach with the customer, but here's what I'm thinking. And here's why, right? I'm almost going to take the questions that I answered them and proactively give them the answers to those same questions in my answer of what I was thinking. And then what do you think about that? Do you think that maybe there's a happy medium of bringing our solutions together? Do you still, think yours is the better way? Like, let's work together to come up with our solution here. That is how I approach disagreements, is almost always in collaboration, unless there is just a clear-cut winner. But even I seek their feedback on my idea, because a lot of times you will either then get them to actually kind of agree, because they'll say out loud, oh, I didn't think about the factor that you did. It's the opposite, right? They get some discovery on their end as to why your approach is going to be what it is, or whatever it might be, and they come over to your side. Or actually collaborative effort and bringing a hybrid approach is the ideal. So it's like, this is my process of ask questions, parlay the questions into common ground, and then at the end of the finding common ground, say, hey, do you think that maybe there's a way to hybridize this? Or do you think moving forward with, my method is going to be the best, right? Because again, if you, through your line of questioning, the disagreement is alleviated, then they've already gotten their win, if you will. I don't want to look at it as winning and losing, but like their way is going to be the way you're moving forward with. So you're already eliminating that with the questions or supporting it with the questions. Then you're going to parlay that into, if you still disagree, here's my 2 cents, providing all the information that you just asked them about, and then take that into, where do we go from here? So if I were to explain this for how do you handle disagreements with coworkers, it's going to be exactly that, right? So I'm someone who focuses on active listening. I do this through a line of questioning where I try to understand people's point of view, where they're coming from, what considerations, how they came to that conclusion. And I really try to dive deep to understand. That potentially alleviates the disagreement entirely. And then we actually move forward with their method. If the disagreement still stands, then this is where I'm going to give them my 2 cents and try to find common ground of saying, hey, here's what I am thinking about how to approach the situation and why, and give them the information to the same questions you just asked them. Do you think that a hybrid approach is the right one here? Or which one of these do you actually like the best? Right. And then continue that conversation from there. That's how I approach disagreements with coworkers. And it's been very, very successful and highly receptive to people because it starts with questioning. Okay, on to the next question. We got describe a challenge you have faced at work. This is one that you want to be genuine. I will say the higher the stakes, the better. But the factor above all of the higher stakes is which one are you most excited about? Like, and this is the way I'm going to flip this in a positive way. If you ever get asked this question, the answer that I want you to give is if I were to ask you, what are you most proud of that you've ever accomplished at work? That's the answer I want you to give, because your passion and bravado and excitement, when you tell that story, that's going to come through and speak 10,000 times more than a scalability challenge. So those are kind of the two key factors. And if they're the same, if the one you're most excited about was the greatest scale, even better, right? But if I had to pick between these two, meaning the highest scaling challenge or the most passionate one, pick the most passionate, then prioritize scalability. But this one is honestly, rehearse your story. Try to keep it to probably, I'd say, a minute to 2 minutes, similar to Tell Me About Yourself, right? Where you describe the problem in depth, what the challenge was, what the result, how you handled it, what communication, what was your post-mortem, all these different aspects, right? So you want to do it start to finish entirely. And this is one that, again, I like to end with a question of, is there any place where you like me to dive deeper? Or does this challenge relate to anything you've experienced, right? This is a great, great, great question to facilitate that conversation, to get more insights throughout the conversation. So this is one to be genuine, but choose the one you are most passionate about above all else. And so for me, luckily, like these two things almost coincide. I would say it's probably my second or third highest scale and impressive answer is the one I'm the most passionate about, because it not only showcased for me some technical acumen, but some stress management and communication with executives. And long story short of it, I caused an issue with one of my previous employers that literally cost multiple millions in a single day. Got a direct call from the CEO. I had to tell the CEO that I couldn't talk to him because I had to stop the bleeding of his money, and I'd give him a call when it was done. So there's a lot of cool aspects of the story. It wasn't, like I said, it was a pretty big scale, being millions of dollars in a single day that I cost a company. But that's probably my favorite story, because it was such a huge growth moment for me of how to interact with leadership, how to manage my stress, what to do in, crisis time and these sorts of things. So your passion comes through super, super, super hard. And literally me just giving you guys that general overview, like I got goosebumps, like thinking about that moment again. Like that's the type of excitement I'm talking about. Like that will come through in your storytelling, as I'm sure you just kind of felt in that 30-second snippet I gave you of my story. Okay, where do you see yourself in 5 years? So this is one that it depends on, I'm honestly going to say, how risky you want to go here. So if you have something actually already defined, great. Another honestly solid answer is something along the lines of, I want to be in your chair. I want to be in your role, or I want to be in your boss's role if you think you could be that aggressive, right? Now, if you're going to go that risky route of like, I want to be in your position, or I want to be in your boss's position, or whatever, then this is the thing, is that a lot of good promotions and working relationships happen from mutual benefiting parties. So what you can do here is you could say, look, I want to see myself in your chair because I'm going to help you get to the one above it, right? My goal is to ultimately become an executive. I'm not going to achieve that in 5 years. That's probably going to take me 7, 10, 12 years, but you are my next step. So my objective is going to be, how am I so good at my job and make you look so good in your job that we get you to the next level, which then gets me to the next level. That's what we're going to do here and we're going to do that by lining out a little bit of a roadmap in terms of the skills that you need to develop, the initiatives that you've been made aware of, whatever it might be. That is a very risky approach for some people because some people are going to be intimidated by this response. But if it's the genuine one, then do it. Again, if you haven't noticed my other through line, I'm going to circle back here, right? The 2 through lines for all of this line of questioning: be genuine and tailor it to the company. Those are the 2 things to be successful in an interview. If you haven't done your research and you don't know yourself well enough to answer these questions, you're going to fail immediately. Okay. So this is a great way to say, where do you see yourself in 5 years? Is, like I said, in your chair, in your seat, even above you, whatever it might be. Or it could just simply be that you have something else laid out, right? Maybe it is just simply becoming a senior in your role or getting promoted for the first time and whatever it might be. So it doesn't have to be in that leader's chair, but if you have something lined out, say that, but don't be scared to say, like, I want your job. Right. One of my, favorite moments was actually this past interview cycle, and I ended up getting the offer. I just didn't accept it because it wasn't a compelling offer in comparison to the other 5 that I got. And this was back in August of this past year, August 2024. As I interviewed with the CTO, for which was two levels between us. So it would have been 3 promotions total to get there. And I got asked this question. And I said, I want to be in your job in 5 years. I want to be the CTO of this organization. Here's where I think I'm lacking between me and a CTO now, which was a lot of business acumen and strategic planning. And so I began to do that in my last job through succession planning, budget management, resource allocation, but there's still a lot in terms of interacting with the rest of the business that I need to do a little bit of improvement on, really understand the nitty gritty of the finance team and the sales teams and the marketing teams and the other ones. While I have a lot of work experience with them and project initiatives with them, understanding their underlying business philosophy and how I can leverage technology to do that is where I really need to have my growth area to, I think, really set me up to be a successful CTO. Right. And it's funny because this is one where the guy was like, I love it. Like, I'm willing to work with you on developing that path, after your first 6 months type thing, to where, let's get you onboarded, get you into your role, get you into the general workflow of things, but then we'll plan your growth roadmap on being in my chair. Like that it's one of those things where by high performers, it's received super well. So answer it one of those 2 ways. I want to be in your job or above your job, or here's my vision for the next 5 years. Again, be genuine. What's your leadership style? Leadership is in play no matter your role, even if you are an individual contributor. And that's the key to answering this question, regardless of where you are at. If you are a leader, give your genuine style. For me, I'm big on transparency, communication, and I will also see constant improvement from myself and my team. So a strategy that I employ, which I don't tell them this in the interview because I don't want it to be known and used against me, but something that I will typically do is, from a project management perspective, is I will give the business this deadline that's over here and a little bit farther out. And then I'm going to come to my internal team and say, hey, here's the deadline of the business. How do we cut that in half? That's what we're going to aim for. Go. Right. And then this way we are constantly, we're constantly in a state of improvement, because if we didn't achieve it, then the question becomes why. And it's not like it's, we're being punished or it's terrible, because we're only halfway through the deadline that we actually have to achieve. But if we did achieve it, then it makes us look super, super awesome. But when we go for the why didn't we achieve it, it can be, was it genuinely impossible? Meaning, like, we just don't have the resources, we don't have the tooling, or the actual complexity of the initiative was just too great. Or if it was, oh, you know what, like, we kept experiencing these types of roadblocks. So how do we get ahead of these in our discovery phase, right? Like, it sparks a lot of questions midway through a project to know how you can improve. And so I'm one that I will continuously seek improvement from myself and the people who work for me. I will do it through transparent communication. I'm big on incentives and growth and trying to get people where they want to go, because that ultimately helps everybody. And that's really my leadership style and approach. Now, if you're an individual contributor, then you can say, look, I know I'm not officially a leader. It is not in my title and it's not in my expectation, but I am someone who I seek to be a leader eventually, or I'm inherently, people pick me out as a leader. And this seems to happen because I strive to produce high quality work. I strive to always try to help other people every opportunity that I get. I'm constantly researching, again, doing the updating in my field from A, B, and C. No matter what, some of us have some element of leadership. And it's just figuring that out. It does not have to be a part of your title. And here's our last and final question before we get into the way that you can use AI to kick ass at all these questions. What questions do you have for us? Okay, so this question used to open up the door for opportunities that you maybe haven't asked already, right? So you can say, for instance, let's just run through some of these 11 real quick that I mentioned. So what's your greatest strength and your greatest weakness? You tell your strengths, you tell your weaknesses. Then you can say, something along the lines of, how can we work together? How would you help, together us work with the weaknesses? Or, hey, what's your greatest strengths? What's your greatest weaknesses? Then you could say, can I ask what the current department or the current role's strengths and weaknesses are, like in terms of the organization, right? So you're kind of bringing it back to the company of opening up what their strengths and weaknesses are that they have identified within the role itself or within the company or the department or whatever kind of scale or scope you give them and they want to give it to. And then you can respond by saying, oh, well, here's how I fixed that in the past, or here's how I would approach that. Does that make sense to you guys? What do you think? Go from there. Why do you want this job? So, I kind of mentioned this earlier, right? So when you're answering this one, you want to align with your research and with the job description itself. And this is where you can say, when you're kind of mentioning the company values and their initiatives and their mission, then you can bring it back to, is my understanding of what you guys are seeking correct? Is that your current initiative? Is this your current mission? Are these your current values? And start that discussion about how you fulfill those things to even a deeper level. Okay. Your ideal work environment. Again, here's where I thrive. Is that the type of environment that you guys produce? Or do you guys, what is your current culture from your ideal work environment? What is your ideal candidate? Right? You could take all of these questions and flip them around into their opposite to having them give you the information. When they give you the information of what their ideal or who their ideal candidate is, what the weaknesses they've identified are, or whether or not this is their current mission and these sorts of things, that's your chance to pounce and provide value immediately in the interview. Okay. So I'm going to review these 11 questions here real quick with just the list of questions, and then I'll give you the way to do this in AI. So what's your greatest strengths and weaknesses? Tell me about yourself. Why do you want this job? How do you handle stress? What's your ideal work environment? How do you stay up to date in your field? How do you handle disagreements with coworkers? Describe a challenge you faced at work. Where do you see yourself in 5 years? What's your leadership style? What questions do you have for us? Okay, take that list of 11 questions. Put it into ChatGPT, Grok, Claude, don't care. And what you're going to say is, you are an expert corporate communicator that specializes in interviewing candidates for any given role. These questions are not specific to any particular role. They're much more about the behavioral side of the equation. I would like for you to pick 3 of these questions at random and ask me them in an interview style. At the end of me giving you the answer to each question, I then want you to give me feedback based off of your expertise as a communicator in how I can improve, and at the same time, what I did well. I might ask you to then repeat this exercise over and over again, but this will be the general workflow. You will pick 3 questions at random. You will then give me feedback on what I did well and what I did not. And then I will let you know if I want to do another cycle, and we will continue to go from there. Simple prompt, but this is a way for you to get infinite repetition, constant feedback on this, and then your next interview, you can nail it. All right, again, if you like this content, hit the subscribe and the like button, notification bell. I also post daily on LinkedIn, X, and Instagram. Check me out there. Down below, I'm also putting all of my content, career coaching strategies, everything in a school community, trying to help people have more strategies at hand. It is a completely free community. And I'm also trying to help you build your network with other like-minded, high-performing professionals. So check that out. All the links are below. Until next time, thank you.